Welcome to our first Photoshop lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be working primarily with our selection tools, and we are also working in a destructive mode here, destructive editing, which means if I make a selection and I move it, and then I decide I'm done with it, but later on I want to move this again. And so I make a selection and I try to move it. You'll notice that it takes whatever is underneath it with it as well. So that means that we have to commit to our steps and not make any mistakes really. Otherwise, we'll run into some problems. So keep that in mind. So we'll go back here and start from the beginning. And we'll start making our vegetable face. So, getting started. You can see that by clicking on the mountains here, I can zoom in on my image, which is gonna, of course, make it easier to work with. And if you look over here, we're at 500% in our zoom. So over here will tell you what magnification you're at. First thing we're going to do is start with our marquee tool, and you can see if I click and hold down, I have all these different marquee tool selections, and because we're working with a circular shape here, I want to select the circle or elliptical marquee tool. You can also notice there's a little M here. You can also just hit the M key on your keyboard to choose that as well. So if I start to drag out my selection, you can see that it's not perfectly selecting around that. So I have a few options. I can hold down the space bar, which will allow me to move my selection wherever I want. And I can just reposition it at the top edge and start to drag this out. And again, just each time, holding my space bar key and making a nice selection around our blueberry. So once I let go, I've committed to this selection. If I don't like what I want, you can go up here to select and deselect, or you can hit Control D on your keyboard as a shortcut, and that will also select it as well. But I like my selection. I'm ready to move my blueberry to start forming the eye. And I'm just going to click up here on my move tool, and it brings up a box. If you don't see this box around your blueberry, you want to make sure at the very top here, we have a Show Transform Controls button that we want to make sure it's checked. So you can see unchecked leaves just the selection, and with it checked, I get the box, and it makes it a little bit easier to work with. And so we get our eye here. And if I hold the space bar, you can see a little hand comes up, and I can move in this zoom view my canvas around, which is also very useful. So I hit enter to commit to that movement, and again I can use the select and deselect, or Control D and that'll deselect it. And remember, we talked about destructive editing, so if I don't like where I moved my blueberry and I try to make a selection around it now and move it, it's going to take the carrot with me, and you can see that it lost the carrot. We got that blue background showing up. So that's why we have to be careful with unselecting something in this mode of editing we are currently doing. So I'm going to zoom out here. Actually, I will make my selection on my eye first. So again, we'll go with our elliptical marquee tool. And this time I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to select from the middle, holding down the Option key or the Alt key on a PC. And if I drag out, you can see holding the Alt key down, I can actually just make my selection grow out from the middle. So it's a nice way of getting a nice even circle around a shape. So remember, we had just using the space bar and moving our circle. We can also choose in the middle with the Alt keys. So you want to try both. Zooming out here, again, I'm going to take my move tool. And we're going to move our eye in place wherever you'd like it to be. Hit enter to commit to that. Now I need another eye, and we can do that in a few ways. These ways, just hold down your Alt key, and you'll notice, let's zoom in here. Remember, you can zoom just right up here at the top. If I hold down my Alt key, notice it turns into a double arrows. And now when I move it, it just makes a copy of it. The other way would be kind of like if you're working in Word, you know, the whole copy and paste method would also do the job, but the Alt key is a little bit faster. And I'll hit Control D there to deselect, and we can move on to our next shape. So zooming in, we'll go with the nose. We can use our magic wand tool. And so we have our tolerance set up here. That's how many colors, similar to the one I click on, it's going to choose from. And remember, if it chooses too much, then you just lower that tolerance. If it's not choosing quite enough, then we can increase that tolerance. Right now, 30 should be good. And I select the pair. Notice it didn't select everything, but instead of changing my tolerance, because that's a pretty good selection, I can just hold down the Shift key, and you'll notice a little plus next to the magic wand now. And I can just add in those last few selections that I need that didn't quite get it the first time around. And we'll want to move out. And if you hit the V key, that is your shortcut to your move tool. And that way you don't have to do anything, you just move it on over. And we place our nose and deselect that. Alright, so we have some eyes. We can give him some eyebrows. And so we have this radish here that we're using for an eyebrow. And we can select this in a pretty simple way. Because notice it's just floating on our white background. So I can't really use an elliptical tool because, or a marquee tool, because it is going to not give us a selection around it. There's too many colors for the magic wand. So we're actually going to do a combination of both of those. I'm going to drag a box with my marquee tool here, the rectangular one, around it. And now what I can do is I've constrained this kind of area, and I can go over here to my magic wand tool, and I can hold down the Alt key, and you'll notice that now my magic wand has a little minus sign next to it. And if I click inside my box, it will deselect all that white and only select our eyebrow or our radish. And we can zoom out here so you can see what we're doing. And go to our move tool and move that in place. And I will hold down my Alt key and we'll make a copy of it. I'm going to drag my copy up here for the time being. If I hit Control and T, that's going to go up to the same thing if I went to Edit and Free Transform. And what we want to do is we want to flip this so that the eyebrow is going the other way. So that if I just put it here, then that kind of looks a little bit odd because they're both pointing in the same way, and our eyebrows wouldn't really look like that. So then I could just right-click here and just tell it to flip it horizontal. And you can see it did a nice little flip there for us. And well, I can place it how I need it. And it looks better that way. So we got eyebrows, eyes, nose. We can go with a mouth. And we can choose our mouth in a few different ways. We have a magnetic lasso tool here we can try out. So if I just click and hold, you can drag around this. You can also just make a kind of circular shape with your elliptical marquee tool. Sometimes in Photoshop, or almost all the time, there's always more than one way to do something. And that makes a nice little mouth selection there. And I'm just deselecting with Control D. If you don't like the magic wand, notice it did leave a little bit of that brown there. So if I wanted to, I'll go back. Maybe that wasn't my best choice, which sometimes happens. So we'll just go with kind of an oval shape here. And I'm just holding my space bar down and moving it around and kind of getting a nice mouth selection there. And moving that. And it looks a little bit better because now we get rid of that brown that was first showing up. Alright, we got the last few shapes here. We can go with some ears. And again, I'm going to take my magnetic lasso tool, and magnetic one just kind of helps make a selection for you. As you're kind of tracing around, it can see, like on our orange here, the differences of the dark and the light areas. And makes a nice selection around it, kind of separates them out. And we'll move this over. So ears kind of look funny if they are sticking straight out. So I want to rotate this, and all I got to do is, if I just move, right now this kind of double arrow will let me kind of change its size, which you can also do. But if I just move the mouse a little bit to where it's on the outside, you can see it turns to this bent arrow, and that's the one that will allow us to rotate. And I will just rotate that ear, and we just kind of put it in place here. And again, I'll hold down the Alt key because we want 2 ears. I can go up here again to either Edit and Free Transform or Control D. Right click, and again, just tell it flip horizontal, and that will give us an ear that will sit on the face the right way. All right, let's make our chef a little bit more fancy here. We can use our magnetic lasso tool here again. So it didn't get a perfect selection. That's okay. You just go to my regular lasso tool and just hold the shift key down. You notice a little plus shows up there. And I can just kind of freehand that out and get that selection there. And I want to get rid of this selection a little bit more, because what I want to do, holding down the Alt key, is kind of make this hat so it's going to kind of just fit on our melon shape here a little bit better, which you'll see in a second here how this is going to work out. Because our melon is curved, I made a kind of a curved bottom there. So then when I go to put this on him, see, it kind of follows that curve a little bit more and adds a little bit more of a realistic look to our guy. So he's got his nice little chef hat on. And the last thing we want to do is going to be our selection around our bow tie pasta here, because it's going to be our bow tie. So when I get here to where it's going to be jagged, you can actually switch between shapes here if I hold down the Alt key. And then I can just use the polygonal lasso selection to get a nice selection around that. And just move that in place. And deselect that. And we're almost done. We're going to do one last thing. We don't need all this empty dead space anymore. So the last tool we're going to work with today is going to be our crop tool, which is just letter C as a shortcut on your keyboard. And I just select that, and it brings up this little kind of cropping. And I just click and drag. And once I have that, you can see this dark area is what it's going to get rid of. This lighter area is what it's going to be keeping. And I just hit enter, and that commits our crop. And that's your finished product.